All right, today we're putting on our detective hats and digging into the ancient epistle to the Ephesians. We're going to be using William Paley's framework to go straight to the evidence, those subtle hidden clues that can tell us if this letter is the real deal. So let's get right into the nitty-gritty. So here's our game plan. We're going to look at three really interesting lines of evidence. First, what I'm calling the Colossian connection. Then, we'll check out the author's unique fingerprints. And finally, a fascinating clue hidden in a single word about a prisoner's chain. After all that, we'll see how strong the case really is.
First up, we're unlocking the clues. This is all about looking for those subtle threads that are woven into the very fabric of the text, often hiding in plain sight.
And, this is the core of William Paley's whole idea. He basically argued that anyone can fake the big, obvious stuff, but it's the little, unintentional details, the stuff that's so subtle you wouldn't even think to invent it, that's where you find the real proof. It's what flows naturally from a real story. So let's go hunting for some. Okay, so our first major piece of evidence is this really strange, really deep relationship between the letter to the Ephesians and another letter, the one to the Colossians. The similarities here go way beyond simple coincidence. It's an unmistakable link. And this is what's so brilliant about Paley's approach. He doesn't just wave his hands and say, hey, these look similar. No, he breaks it down into three specific layers of connection, and each one gets more and more subtle. Let's dig into each one. Okay, layer one is the most straightforward, identical phrasing. I mean, look at this. It's practically a copy-paste job, introducing the same guy, Tychicus. Now, this makes a lot of sense if the same author is writing two letters around the same time. But, to be fair, a really clever forger might try to replicate this. So it's a solid start, but the evidence is about to get much stronger. All right, now it gets really interesting. Layer two, partial resemblances. Check this out. You see all the same key words and ideas: working, power, raised from the dead, being dead, quickened together. They're all there in both texts, but they're kind of jumbled up in a slightly different order with different phrasing. Paley's point is, this is not how someone copies something. This is how a real person's mind works. It's the same thought process, just expressed naturally on two different occasions. And now for the third, and maybe the most subtle layer of all, a shared order of topics. In both of these letters, the writer goes from talking about giving thanks straight into instructions for wives to submit. Now, what's the logical connection there? There really isn't one. So why does this exact sequence pop up in both letters? Paley says this is a quirk, a peculiar habit of thought that's unique to the author. It's like a mental fingerprint. So you gotta ask yourself, what are we looking at here? Is this the work of some master forger who planned out three different layers of subtle deception? Or is it the natural, kind of messy, genuine fingerprint of a single author's mind? That question is the perfect transition to our next piece of evidence. And that's what we're looking for next, the author's fingerprints. We're talking about those little unique stylistic quirks, the verbal habits, that are almost impossible to fake convincingly. And Paley points out two really striking examples right here in Ephesians, a recurring metaphor the author loves to use, and let's just say a very unusual way he builds his sentences. First up is this riches metaphor. The author seems to love using the word riches, not to talk about money, but just to mean abundance or greatness. Like here, the riches of his glory. It's a pretty specific and unique way of getting an idea across, right? And here's the kicker. This isn't a one-off. This exact verbal habit pops up again and again across a bunch of other letters attributed to Paul. It's a consistent stylistic fingerprint, tying them all together with a single authorial voice. The second fingerprint is even more peculiar. Paley calls it going off at a word. Just look at this passage. The author is talking about exposing dark deeds with the light. The moment he uses that word, light, boom, he's off on this sudden parenthetical detour, a whole mini-sermon on light, before he just as abruptly jumps back to his original point. Now think about it. This is a complex, kind of messy way to write. It completely breaks the flow of the argument. If you are a forger trying to create a convincing imitation, this is exactly the kind of thing you would avoid. But it's perfectly consistent with a passionate mind, maybe dictating a letter in real time and getting carried away by an idea. It feels very human. Now for our final piece of evidence. And honestly, this one might be the most compelling of all, because it connects a single, highly technical Greek word in Ephesians to a specific historical practice described in a completely different ancient document, the Acts of the Apostles. The author here describes himself as an ambassador in bonds. The key here is the specific Greek phrase he uses, in Horæ. That's literally in a chain. And that exact word choice is absolutely crucial. Okay, now let's jump over to the book of Acts. When Paul gets to Rome as a prisoner, the text describes his specific form of custody. He gets to live by himself, but is constantly guarded by a single soldier.
So here is the punchline. That word, haeschylus, it's not a generic word for chains or imprisonment. It is the precise technical term for the single light chain used to bind a prisoner's wrist to the soldier guarding him, the exact kind of Roman custody described in Acts. This is an incredibly subtle, specific, and totally undesigned coincidence.
So, let's step back and look at the whole case. When we put all these different pieces of evidence together, what do they tell us? We've seen those deep literary parallels with Colossians, working on 3 different levels of subtlety. We've identified unique stylistic fingerprints, the author's personal habits of language and thought, and we've uncovered this incredible moment of historical specificity with that one word for the prisoner's chain. And the true power of this whole argument isn't in any one of these clues by itself. It's in how they all fit together. You have literary evidence, stylistic evidence, and historical evidence all reinforcing one another from completely different angles without any sign that they were deliberately planned to agree. And that leaves us with Paley's powerful final question. If this web of subtle, complex, and interlocking evidence isn't the mark of reality, if it isn't the genuine article, then what is it? It's a question that really makes us look at these ancient texts, not just as words on a page, but as artifacts with a hidden story to tell.